So yes, today we are recording. It is Thursday, December 21st. Happy solstice, 2023, and I am here, Cynthia Tobar, oral historian for this oral history initiative for the Fish Parade and Arts Festivals Oral History Project, based out of Hunts Point, the Bronx, correct, Hatuey? Just want to make
Yeah,
sure. And I would love for you both, however you see fit, maybe we'll start with Danny and then we'll start with Hatway, where you can introduce yourselves and your affiliation, please.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Danny Peralta. I'm formerly the executive director of the Point, and currently I'm a consultant for Community Tech New York, which is a Wi-Fi driven organization.
that's great. I'm Hatuey. I'm an artist in residence at the Point CDC.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, both of you, for taking time out of your very busy days to schedule this interview and to share a little bit about your own takes and insights on the Fish Parade. I wanted to ask you both first a little bit about your background and your early life and anything that you can remember about growing up with your family, or I'm very interested in what your backstory is about. And you could tell me as little or as much as you care to share about that, because I think that it'll help give folks some context about later on your involvement with the Fish Parade. So you can begin anywhere you like, and maybe we'll kick it off to Hathaway first, if that's all right.
Sure. Oh my goodness. So let's see. I'll try to keep it brief. So I I was born in the Dominican Republic. My mom's Dominican, my father Puerto Rican. However, I grew up most of my life in Puerto Rico. And so I used to go back and forth between those two places when I was, elementary school age. And so I used to do that. So part of my family lives within those two places and also spread through the United States for the most part. Some folks in the Bronx, some folks in Brooklyn, some folks in Louisiana and California and whatever. But you know, and so let's see. And so I grew up in the theater, literally. And so what that is basically, my father used to be a light designer for theater in Puerto Rico. So I used to spend my time like waiting for him to get out of work or whatever. And so I spent a lot of time there. So because of that, I had the privilege uh, and the opportunity to see things that a kid my age would never have been able to see otherwise. So like, ballet from Russia and like, performances from famous musicians like, I don't know, the Gillespie and things like that, which I've never knew who they were or anything. So when I was a kid, it's like, well, I'm just gonna hang out here because I need to hang out there, wait for my dad. So I was exposed to a lot of that when I was growing up. And so, yeah, so I think that kind of influenced some of my path in life. Um, my mom is a working class. She is a domestic worker. She lives in Puerto Rico, although she's Dominican. So she's about to retire, but she's basically, works cleaning people's homes and things like that. So I also spent time with her doing that when I was a teenager. So I helped her out and stuff. Um, but not as much as, other kids perhaps did. And so also that influenced part of my growing up. Um, yeah, and I had the opportunity to go to school and high school and and college and all those things. And one of the first folks in my family who had a graduated from college. My father did, but it took a long time to do that. So, um, but from my generation, things like that. So that and long story short, I came to New York and lived in the Bronx for the past 16 years and been involved with different kinds of organizations and different kinds of projects and different kinds of things. Um, Always in the arts and trying to be in the arts that is connected to social justice somehow, because I believe in the role that art could play in that. And so yeah, and so I've been involved in doing different kinds of projects with different kinds of organizations, and the point is one of those. I mean, this is like very choppy, but okay, Cliff Notes version. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Hatuey. And that's a lovely backstory. And Danny, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Similar to Hatuey, I grew up, my parents are Dominican. They came here actually at different times, but my family has been in this country now since like the 1920s. And so they've kind of been here for a long time. My father grew up here. My mother came when she was like 19. So I have like a interesting foothold, I guess you could say, in New York. I was born in the Bronx, but my family has lived in Inwood for over 50 years. So I've lived my whole life, pretty much my adult life. My whole life pretty much has been in and out of like 207th Street and Post and wherever else I've lived. And in the last 20 some odd years, I've lived in the Bronx, and grew up going to Catholic schools, kind of, how do you say, like at a real crazy time, right? In New York City, right? The 80s, 90s, right? Very interesting times, I would say, in the neighborhood I grew up in. A lot of Dominican families, a lot of immigrant families, but then also like these spaces where I can kind of, I don't know, where I kind of grew a love for the arts and a love for, I'm gonna say, nature and like, green spaces and stuff like that. And so it was like, all the crazy stuff going on the block that informed my life. And then I would, venture off into Inwood Park and kind of find, some sort of peaceful. I didn't realize this until I got older. This is what I was doing, but that's kind of the way that I kind of grew up, was like being surrounded by a lot of noise and kind of seeking a way out of it, or another way through it, let's say that. And that's what kind of art has always been for me. My mother was a caretaker for many years. She babysat children for like over 20 years. So I was raised with a lot of children in my house, from the morning time to the end of the day. And again, that informed, I'm gonna say, my urgency, or like, I don't know, my inclination to become like a teacher. And so I wanted to be an artist my whole life, but nobody around me identified that way. I didn't understand what that meant to be an artist. There was no, I would say, like working examples in my immediate, surrounding. So I went off and became a teacher, and I got educated as a high school educator, social studies education. I was going to be a teacher, and that's what I spent many years trying to accomplish. And then I realized that wasn't for me, and that again, I needed to be an artist. I needed to be around more art, and that's kind of when I ventured into doing youth development work, and then I worked in a bunch of neighborhoods. And you fast forward to like 2002, I found the Point, because I wanted to do black and white photography, and I was very interested in learning how to be in a darkroom and how to make art in that kind of setting. And I found the Point, and again, I found another language once I got there. It wasn't just like art. I learned about how people organize and why they organize, and a lot of the, I'm going to say, the frustrations that I had and my political leanings, I would say, kind of found a home there, and it wasn't just to point out things that were not working, but it was really about like, what can we do to change that, and seeing that play out. And I don't know. I don't know if growing up I ever saw that, to be quite frank. I never saw people empowered in that way, unless again they were artists and they were creating something and they felt like some sort of power through that, but not in an organized way. I didn't grow up around community organizations or after school programs or, galleries or theaters around. Like I just literally grew up, like in a regular, I would say, neighborhood from the 80s in the Heights, right? And whatever that meant. So I found it and I saw it, and I grew up also with a lot of amazing, like-minded young people like myself, I'm going to say, and we kind of kept each other out of trouble and kept each other sane and informed each other through our art and the things that we love to do and experience.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Danny. And actually reflecting on Hatuey's earlier intro and then reflecting on yours, it's interesting that you both happen to cross paths at the Point. And I'm really interested in teasing out those differences. You having had deep roots in New York City as a born and raised New Yorker, really. And then Hatuey, you coming in later in life to the Point. And I was wondering if you both had any insights to share about that trajectory before we get into teasing out what the point was or what it meant to you in your growth, either as artists, as educators, as human beings, or as community members. Maybe we'll kick it off to you, Hatuey, if that makes any sense.
Even how do we meet? How do we met? I'm doing this
The
because I see your.
trajectory of how Danny spoke a little bit about the impact that the Point had because he had already pre-existing ties to the neighborhood, and then he just happened upon the Point at that point in his life, but coming with his background as being a New Yorker. And I'm interested in you, Hatuey, representing more of this immigrant experience. And I would love to hear your insights on that, and then how that coming to the Point had that impact to you, or what was your reflection on that?
Yeah. Let's see, I don't remember when I first heard about the Point. I moved here in 2007 to New York, to the Bronx. My first job right off the bat was working at the Bronx Museum as a teaching artist.
Nice.
So I was working with young people there, making zines and videos. The program is still going, which is a cool thing. And so I was deeply involved with the Bronx Museum when I, just got here, and I happened to live in the same neighborhood. So it was like my commute was very easy. It was 10-minute walk, and I was there, which was nice. And I think maybe through that work of working with young people at the Bronx Museum, I know the Bronx Museum had a relationship with the Point a long time ago. And I think actually the Bronx Museum was involved somewhat in the fish parade also at some point as well. Don't know the exact details of that, but I know there was something. But it was through the relationship of me working with young people, being an educator. I wanted also to teach, because I knew that the art that I was making was not gonna be giving me paying my rent. So I knew that, I was not interested in the gallery kind of art world in general, like that was not my thing. I was never interested in that in particular. So I knew, oh, what can I do? I can teach, and I thought maybe I can teach my dream was like, oh, I'm gonna teach in a university or something. But that's, fraud and a lot of issues with being in action. And I've done that actually, but, it was not necessarily the best place for me. I realized that after I was teaching at the college level. Anyhow, but I was really involved with young people, supporting their creativity and their leadership at the Bronx Museum. And so I think it was through that I saw, oh, there's this other organization in the Bronx doing, really great work. And that's kind of, I think that's how I knew about the Point. And then, I was able to do a short project back in 2012, I think it was, when Hurricane Sandy, it was during that time. It was actually, we did an opening like that week after, like a couple of days after Sandy hit, where it was the first time I actually got to work at the Point. And so I was working with Carrie Clark, and there was this residency program that it was done by this other organization that it's called, I don't remember right now. It'll come back to me. And the idea was that they were going to bring an artist from abroad and pair them with an artist from, each borough had a pairing. So artists from all over, and they would work for 3 months or something. So I was working with an artist from Thailand, and it was the first time he came to New York City. And so because there was an anchor institution, that anchor institution was the Point, and Carrie was the person who kind of orchestrated that. I was able to work with the artists and with some of the young people at the Point. That's the first time I think I spent more time here and learning about the work that the Point, has been doing. And so I think through that, maybe I connected with Sharon de la Cruz as well. She was, I think, at that moment doing action or something like that, the program. And so this is the thing about the point that you come here and you're like, I'm here right now actually, with the Teen Love. Um, you come to the space and you can't not be, inspired by it. It's really hard not to, because the story is so powerful, about how this organization came to be, and all the great impact of the work that's been going on for almost 30 years. So it's just like, it is very hard to come here and you be like, meh, it's totally the opposite, right? You really get really inspired. So I thought, oh, maybe one day I can be connected more to the point somehow. And we did some projects actually after that. I don't remember how we met, Danny, but maybe it was maybe during that time frame, maybe.
Yeah. It
Um,
was the artist was making candy, traditional
yes,
candy, and that's how
that's
we
right.
made candy at the point,
Yes.
like a lot of other people. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so that's like 2012, like right. And then, we had the schedule was crazy. And so we had to be done in November. And turns out that Sandy hit right there in the, right at the end of it. And so we decided that we're not gonna cancel it, and the opening and the reception, instead made more like a communal experience where people come eat, and it was music, and it was like a nice way to get people together um, during that hard time. And so, yeah, actually, funny thing is that Ari Rumyang is the name of the artist. He ended up developing the project further after he left here, and he ended up representing Thailand for the Venice Biennale like a couple of years after that, with the project with that project that he kind of incubated here. I don't know if people know that, but
Amazing.
yeah. So, anyways, so when I was then working with the laundromat project a couple of years after that. And we used to have a partnership with the Point, because the laundromat project had a space not far from here on Kelly Street, on the other side of the Bruckner, and it was a community garden with apartment garden level with art space and community program, things like that. And so we were partnering with the Point. This is before my time at work with the laundromat, but I took on that and continue it for the fish parade. So I think that was the first time I was involved with the fish parade, when it was 2016, I think it was. Um, and so the laundromat project used to bring artists to do art activities, kind of like a mini artist, you know, section for the fish parade during that day. Because the fish parade, is a parade, but it ends with a festival. So at that festival, the laundromat project, we used to bring artists to do community engagement programs, and workshops. So that's how I connected, with the fish parade later on as a staff member with the laundromat. And then 2021, right? 2022, it's a blur now. 2022, I became artist in residence here, with this program where they put on Creatives Reveal New York, where they put artists and community organizations to work together. And so one of the things I was focusing on last year was to, because Danny had stepped down by then, and again, Danny was deeply involved with the fish parade, to kind of like continue that tradition after 20 years. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
I mean, thank you for leading us down that path about your first involvement with the fish parade, which I appreciate. I'm really interested too in picking up the threads that you both, while struggling with finding your place or identifying as artists, for Hatuey maybe less so, for Danny a little more so. I feel like the education and arts are not inherently exclusive of one another, that they are also very deeply intertwined with one another. And also your affinity to working with youth. And I was wondering if you, Danny, can talk a little bit more about that and your transition into becoming more involved with the Point. Uh,
Yeah,
if
like I said, I grew up kind of teaching in the summers, right? Like when I was a young man, like if you learn the alphabet in the hood, you probably learned it from me, or some mother just took care of everybody's child. So I was always creating activities, engaging people since I was young. I realized that afterwards. This is kind of how I ended up working with young people. And I guess when you're younger too, you have a certain kind of energy. And I knew, again, off the bat, that I didn't grow up with certain resources. I was very fortunate to get a certain kind of education and a certain kind of knowledge base, and I was very eager to be a part of the world with it. It didn't make sense that I can learn all this stuff and like just keep it in my head and not do anything with it. And that was my mission to some degree, like a very personal mission. And that's how I found the point, right? Like I found the point because again, I was doing the work and I needed an outlet for my own work and for my own ideas, not just what I was working on with other people. And at that point, everything was very separated still in my mind, right? Like you make art and it kind of lives there, and then you go do work here, and then you go home and you do that, and it was very compartmentalized, if you will. And I got to the point, and it was like this village of people behind this wall that all that stuff was like mixed, and they weren't apologetic about it. Like they were artists, they were teachers, they were this, they were that, they were gardeners, they were students. They had no boundaries, and the space, like even though it was like bound to I don't know how many square feet, seemed just like this boundless place. I don't know how to put it to you. It was very, you've been there, Cynthia. Have you been there? I don't know.
Not yet, and I'm
All right.
dying to go, but
You should
I
go to
totally
the
get your point about the
planet.
intersectionality, right? We're
Yes,
not just
yes,
one thing. I get that.
yes. And all those identities, you could be those people in this place. Whereas everywhere I was, people just wanted me to be, 1, 2, 3, or either one. Here they were like, yo, bring 4, 5, right? Like be all the locals you want to be at once. You're welcome. And that was again kind of what I got attached to, was like this the space and these people. And when I started going to the point, it was to take young people to see events because they had the theater, and I was working with young people in Harlem at the time, early 2000s, and then I would take them to see these performances like that poetry slams, right? Or they had like these hip hop organizing conferences, like this hip hop curriculum conferences, like all this kind of stuff that again was very much being built by a lot of, again, people that look like myself, maybe a little bit older, this generation of artists and thinkers, right? And there was a space for that. I came there to learn black and white photography, and then again on Saturdays I would be there for a couple of hours. And before that, I started to go with my camera and actually start to walk around the neighborhood and start to get to know the neighborhood. And my interaction with Hunts Point growing up was going there, sadly, to go see a friend who was at Spofford at the time in the late 90s. So we had to go visit him, and then the media, right? Like this frenzy of like this community of like prostitutes and drugs and like everything burned. And if you go there, you're never gonna come out one piece. And I was not necessarily drawn to that, but I was drawn to presenting what I saw, which was like this amazing community of people that just go to work every day, right? And yeah, there's some stuff going on there, but not because people are interested in that stuff or because it's done by the people. Like you can tell when you walk into the neighborhood how marginalized it is. It's surrounded by highways. Like you can just sort of tell that this is not a mistake that things like this happen there. And I was interested in that. And I was interested in the workers and the auto workers. And I was interested in the guy who runs the parks. And I was interested in, like all of this stuff, the teachers, the artists. I was interested in everybody. And I just ran around and took pictures and stuff. And then at some point, the Point opened up a position to be the director of arts and education. And I remember I was living at the time on Sherman Ave and 167, 168. And I was right off the 35 bus and I took the bus down. I remember, to interview formally for this job. And I never left after that. I don't know how to put it to you. That was 2008. And I went pretty straight up until early this year, even 2023. I stepped down maybe 2 years before as the executive director, but I was still, doing a lot of work, and will continue to still do a little bit of work in the neighborhood. But it drew me in. And as somebody who has a very short attention span and kind of thinks as, I don't know, I realize that a lot of my work is almost like art projects. And so when I'm done with them, I move on. And that's why I kind of had these jobs where I was there for a couple of years. I did what I had to do, and then I disappeared and I moved on. And the Point kind of kept dragging me in and sucking me in. And 2 years of this, and then 3 years of that, and then 5 years of that, and 8 years of this. And you kind of keep taking it on. And that's how I took on the Fish Parade. When I started doing it, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2009. I feel like I did the first Fish Parade, maybe 2010. No, it was 2009. the first time I managed it. And at that point, it had already been going on for several years, and it had a very nice local following. And that's what I loved about it. It wasn't this thing where outsiders would kind of come in and like see how nice the parks were and then come and move in. Like, it wasn't none of that. It was like, this is this neighborhood thing. They're gonna have a stage show, and we're gonna work with a subcode or put together like this talent show, right? And we were gonna invite people to come to these parks that were newly built and that they weren't really using because it was kind of out of the way, and there was all this traffic in the middle, and how do you bring people to these places, and how do you get the young people and the families and the local businesses involved? And to me, again, it was an art project, and it was a culmination of all of the work that the Point was doing programmatically and other people. And that's how I saw it. It was like this thing where it was like a vehicle for highlighting the work that we did, but also the work of the Laundromat project, right? And again, like I think about Fernando from Parks, because he did such amazing work in building out the Menina Street playground, and the rec center. Miss Marie, Miss Louise, right? Like, it was a space for for them to come and do basketball tournaments with their sons. Like, I don't even know how to put this here. It was a space for all these amazing people to be in one space at once, and that was what drew me to it. I was equally as fascinated by the characters and the other directors and the other programming people and the young people that I was about this thing. I just wanted to kind of like present them, and I wanted it to be around them. And if there was a vehicle to do that, I wanted to be connected to that. And it was a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, putting together a festival is not easy work, right? Because it's a different, it's a job unto itself. It really is. And when we were doing all this other stuff and dealing with fiscal issues or dealing with environmental issues, and then hurricanes and all this other stuff going on, it really made it, I guess, difficult to see the value in it until we did it. And the third weekend in June is like more important to me than other holidays that other people celebrate, right? Like, I take that day very seriously. I wake up to it and I go to sleep to it and I think about it, and it's very unique in that regard. That again, it really just celebrates this neighborhood. And it says, look, we're here, we've been here, like we're human. I don't know how to put it to you. It's that. And it's not about fancy, decorations. It's not about, big, trucks coming through to, like make noise. It's really just about like a bunch of young people and families marching up the hill, going around in a circle and coming back to these parks. And that, to me, there's nothing like that. I don't know. It's so valuable and so necessary when you build communities out, So I said a lot. I'm sorry. I just got
No,
excited.
not at all. And I loved all of it. And I'm actually very curious in learning more of the specifics about what led to that collaboration what was the community outreach effort like to get everyone involved with the fish parade? I want to hold that question, as well as thinking about the environmental justice issues that sort of led up to the creation or the necessity for the community to come together as a result of what was happening environmentally, globally, politically at that time. And I'm wondering if either one of you want to share your reflections or insights on that.
Yeah. I mean, if I may, like, to understand that this parade and festival really came from a couple of things. As it lives now, like the iteration that lives now, again, it was kind of evolved to this thing, but it was a protest, and it was a fight against the Fulton Fish Market coming to the neighborhood, right? A neighborhood that has tons of food and resources around that, but that nobody has access to, right? And it's just full of trucks, right? And you're looking at, garbage being, left there. And so the neighborhood was known for many years as kind of like the place where you wanted to put the industry that you didn't want. And that was the fight. People did not want this thing there. They didn't want more trucks. They didn't want unequal access to fresh fish. They didn't want fish in the neighborhood, right? They had enough of just industry coming in without without being held accountable. Let's say that. And a lot has changed since then. A lot of amazing things have happened in the movement, and that even galvanized New York City. That was a huge fight that again led to other huge fights, and that's how we were able to shut down things like Spofford. And there was just this way that we organized people, and when people came together to fight for Fulton Fish, market coming to the neighborhood, they really fought to come together, period, and to be part of this larger thing. And I think that's what the Fish Parade really galvanized. By the time I got to it, it was already again infused with like a music festival that was going on. that's been going on for over 30, 40 years probably now, the Subco Festival, right? They got absorbed into this, but that's a long-standing piece too, right? That precludes even the point, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
And what
Right?
year frame was that, the Fulton Fish Market era?
This is 20 this is like 2000 and 2001, I believe it is, right? Because it was about 20, 21 years ago. Yeah, so this is around that time. This is around turn of the century, let's say that, right around early 2000s. The date, I don't know why it skips me right now, but yeah, but that was it. And again, it was I've seen pictures of it. It was you know, families got together, they built everything by hand, right? The costumes and the signage. And what happened was it took a lot of effort to do that. And again, people were still interested in working together. And that's how they said, you know what, next year, you know, they lost the fight. Let's say that Fulton Fish Market made it to Hunts Point, right? That wasn't a success, but the success of bringing these groups together was, and that's how everything continued. And the fish parade was born again after that. It was like, well, you know what, we lost that fight, but we're going to use this as a way to keep meeting and celebrating together and bringing our resources together. And that's how it was born. And it evolved into, at some point, like a bunch of stuff, and it still continues to evolve, right? Like an arts festival, and you have still the stage, and you have, you know, we were bringing out the DJs, we're bringing out the salsa performers from the neighborhood, right? You're bringing out all the local vendors. I want to give a shout out to like people like from Mom and Pop Barbecue, right? Like, you know, father and son barbecue, because you know, these are vendors that only come out once a year. They make the best food, and they just bring it and they sell it in one day with our folks in our community, right? You know, and then you have the resources from these community members, right? These, Bella Vista, you know, and Hope and Urban Health Plan, and you have like the schools coming together. What is it? Bronx Charter School of the Arts, when they first came up, they played a big role. They were getting the young people involved, and you know, we had a logo contest for every year for the theme, and we got together with this committee again that had all these different players in it, and some local, some external. Again, people that were just interested in doing something as part of that, and so we've seen so many different versions of it, and now it's kind of like it's living in one place now, right? It was a parade. It kind of comes back to Hunts Point Riverside Park, but for a long time we were going to Pareto Point Park when that was built, and you got to learn the history of that again. Park and a space and a green space that was fought for, right? It wasn't given. It wasn't like any other neighborhood where you just have a park and you grew up around it. People fought to have green spaces, and they shut down the AFCO so they can build this green space and build out this park. And then so you have to celebrate it, right? You have to get people there. You have to have people fishing there and playing, you know, a volleyball on the sand and like using the amphitheater. Like that was the goal, and you couldn't do it alone, man. And that's the history of it. It's like all these different components coming together and people just willingly doing it aside from their job, because this is an adjacent to a lot of people's day jobs. HPAC, I'm going to give them as an example, right? They played a big role. Like, you know, nobody was getting paid for this thing. You know, we were actually looking for ways to support it and get the sponsorship so that we can do bigger things with it. But really, it comes from everybody kind of contributing to it in a very unique way, and kind of putting aside again their own mission, if you will, and their own financial, you know, issues or whatever to do something together. That's very powerful. That's the mission of the Point and a lot of these other orgs, and that's why this is beautiful because it doesn't require much to do it, you know. But the will of the people, honestly.
Well, I disagree. It requires an awful lot of heart and a lot
Yeah,
of.
it does. Yes, the will and the heart. Yes, it's
And I
99.9%.
I'm very interested in, and I can sense that from you, like that interest in getting folks together for the love of the community. And that could be a very challenging thing for many organizations and collectives and groups.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you were all able to manage that successfully. I wanted to give Hatuey some space to also respond, if that's all
Yeah.
right.
No,
And also, I'm very interested because you speak a lot about the Point and how it sort of provides you with this artistic inspiration, but I'm also interested in learning from your perspective what role, how you found community at the Point as an artist and as an individual in the community.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, let's see, so many places to go through. Think about. Hmm. So yeah, I mean, all the things that it's kind of like flipping a little bit what Danny was saying. It's like the place where everything comes together. You know, like your political, you know, education or your like ideologies, your aspirations to make art, and your place where you actually get to teach and meet young people, and all those things kind of like come together in a beautiful, messy way sometimes. And I think that that for me is like what the nice thing about being here, is that I don't have to divide myself in the same way that, Danny was saying earlier, like, I don't have to do that. This is just who I am. This is what it is, this is what we're doing. And so that for me is really, key. Uh, and so actually just to connect it a little bit. So I also learned about Hunts Point through my biking advocacy. I was really involved with doing a lot of, some bicycle riding and organizing rides in the Bronx as a way to get people together, and also as a way to, document and complain and advocate for better biking infrastructure, for safer, paths and things like that. So I work with a bunch of alliance and other places and other people and other like, neighbors. And I still have some good friends from those years. That's how can I also kind of learn about Hunts Point by biking around Hunts Point and learning about it through that lens as a cyclist, which I still, do. Um, and so, and also I understood that the issues that connect that cycling to thinking about ways of connecting people. I think that was really, important for me. And so, I think in the similar way, but in a different angle, bringing people together for that kind of Fish Parade does that in a more powerful, I think, way, because not everyone can get on a bike and ride, right? Not everyone knows how to do it or feel safe and all those things. And I think, that's part of the issue, right? But the Fish Parade is just like you can, if you can walk, or you can put on a little car and you can be driven. You can get, you can be in it. You don't have to, uh the point of entry is very, very easy, right? So anyone can join, right? Which is a beautiful thing. You don't have, there's no like a sign-up sheet that you gotta like pay a fee to participate in. There's no, barrier in that way. You just have to show up. And I think that's a beautiful thing that I really like about the parade, is that, all these folks that perhaps run into each other on the street, or, may know of each other, but may not see each other that much. That's the time and the place where all that, happens. Um, I think it's a powerful thing to have for Hunts Point, because we need to celebrate. We need moments to be able to come together and be joyful and be, celebratory and support local, businesses and young people. Because what we hear so much in the media, it's so terrible, right? And so I think that's one of the nice things about the Fish Parade as well. Um, and for me as an artist, I think what's been great also is that I've been able to like, oh, can we try this thing a little bit? Can we try that thing? And like, oh yeah, let's make this other thing. So it's been a great place to like experiment and bring, another flavor to it, artistically. And that's been cool. I've been doing posters and banners and things that I would never have done before. So, so it's kind of cool. But at the same time, getting people involved. So it's not only like, this is my thing, it doesn't belong to me. This is about creating this thing together, um, with young people, with neighbors. In terms of the artistic stuff that we made little puppets last year. We did, posters, we did banners, and so some people build their own costumes. So um, it became a place for like, let's try these other things that, I mean, that they've been done before, but for me, I've never done it before. So it's like, okay, let's find that place for bring all of those things together: the political stuff, the environmental stuff, the artistic stuff, And I'm always about, and it's why, perhaps when I talk about my art, it's hard for me sometimes, because I generally don't work by myself. I always do create. I understand that I'm very privileged, and so I tend to open up the spaces that I am in to get other people that may not have that opportunity, a chance to work with me. So it's not like, oh, I'm the big thing or anything, but I try as much as I can when I have the space, right? Um, so I'm not the only one creating things, right? Generally, right? When I do projects as an artist, okay, let's do bike rides together. What route should we take? I don't know. Let's figure it out, or like, or understanding also that I don't know, I don't have all the answers or all the um everyone comes with their own experiences, and valuing that it's important, and not putting that, that's not better or worse, it's just another perspective that can be part of, right? And my job as an artist is to, honor that, and if I have the space, to provide that space so that can be amplified, right? So it's bringing that together, if that makes sense. um, and so the fish fry is like the perfect place for all those things to come together and, like, you know, and happen, right? Make that happen. So, yeah, just thinking about that.
Thank you, Hatuey. That's wonderful. And thinking about maybe even taking a step back, and let's talk about the nuts and bolts. What went into the first fish parade, and how has the infrastructure to make that possible been adapted or influenced or changed over time from, I guess, the first year it was held in 2000, and remind me what
2004, I think it was the first
2004
fish
to,
parade.
yeah, the first fish parade to like now. If either one of you want to chime in on that, and share a little bit more about the process of what it takes, the work, how it got going, and community partnerships and outreach, and what was involved with that, and lessons learned so far, from the first year up until this most current year that's coming up.
Just again, just to kind of bring it back to my experience with it, again, I haven't organized in a couple of years. I know Hatuey has been leading it, and there was some folks the year before that, and COVID hit. Like, all that time, I have not been as involved. But I think that, the thing that was very important from the beginning, that was handed to me to some degree, again, was like, how do we like leverage all these networks, that exist, and bring them together. And that's the one thing that I think is like paramount, like at the center of it, right? It's not just individuals, this is like a space for like full networks to come together. That's where you can have basketball tournaments, and you can have music festivals, and you can have these vendors come together, because they're already mobilized, right? It's another space to kind of mobilize the mobilizers, if you will, and you leverage that. So I'm going to say those are the main parts of it, and that means you have to kind of start meeting with people. I mean, I used to start meeting with folks on my best years, like by October, September, October. When programming started, I already started to reach out to the folks and the orgs, and the artists and people that were interested in being a part of it, and mobilizing them and bringing them through a process. I'm going to mention that because that was very important at the time, right? Like, people are doing their jobs, and maybe they're running, let's say, like a workforce development organization, and so they're focused on like, how do you get young people jobs? And here comes this dude talking about, we're going to build out this funky, wacky parade with all this color and all this circumstance and all this pomp, right? And make it fun. And you have to drill this thing into people. You have to kind of break their imagination, if you will, about what a parade and a festival could be, and think about an alternative. And you got to lead them through this process of doing that. And that's how we were doing all these themes, right? It was like, how do we not just have a parade, but like come up with a theme, and let's sit down and play around with words, and let's play around with ideas, and people can lead that, and you kind of just have to facilitate the conversation. And we came up with some amazing ideas, but again, that was central to it, right? Because people have buy-in. They weren't coming to the Points Fish Parade. They were adding to their own fish parade, and they had the stake in it, right? They created the language for it. And I think that's a huge part of it. I think it still continues now, is that it's not just the point leading it. We facilitate a conversation. Yeah, we do a lot of the back work stuff, but really we facilitate a process for others to kind of lead it. And I think that's very powerful. And I think that's the one thing that remains constant. Again, that's how you can bring small businesses out. That's how you can bring the schools out, or what is it, I'm going to mention Edgar Vasquez, right? He's a parade maven. Again, this is a genius at parades. I don't know if that's a thing, but he is that person. And he brings out every year the pueblos from Puerto Rico to march. You know, like that's powerful, right? Like, you know, yeah, I don't even know how to put it to you. Like that's a venue for these folks to celebrate, you know, from several hundred miles away, where they choose to live in New York, and to celebrate their heritage that way. And somebody has this network of those people, and he has like a venue for it. You know, that's it. That's what it's about. And those networks, you know, continues to do it. And every year you meet different people that want to be a part of it. And that's always been a fun part of it too. Is like who coordinates it, changes here and there, and organizations change. But that one part really remains the same. You know, it's like how do you leverage all these networks and create a space for them to hang out, you know, and celebrate for once, as opposed to just working on time all day, you know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and one thing that, you know, I know that there used to be a festival that SEPCO used to have, right?
Yeah.
And like way back for the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, probably before then, right? And SEPCO is Southeast Bronx Community Organization, right? That's I
Yeah, they do
remember
like housing and yeah, for seniors primarily, but you know, they've been involved for many years. That corridor, Southern Boulevard, they helped build a lot of that out, you know, and they continue to manage it. But they were doing that again, and I'm gonna mention another great parade in the neighborhood, the Halloween parade, the community board parade. That's an amazing parade, and that's been going on for many years too. And again, it's like these local alternative traditions and that's another thing that I love too, right? Like when you name things, you own them. But Hunts Point and that neighborhood has like these really amazing traditions that are very, you know, known in that neighborhood. And the fish parade is the kickoff to the summer in that neighborhood, and the Halloween parade is the kickoff to like the fall and back to school for that neighborhood. Like, you know, these things are entrenched generationally now into the neighborhood. People expect it and look for it, and they you know they put it on their calendar that third Saturday in June, that they're going to be a part of this thing, and they're going to reunite with their friends and their family and all that kind of stuff. It's one of those things that I think is also makes it very unique. Is that it is not like Christmas, or it's not like, you know, these larger American things that, you know, you got to buy into. It's just like this thing that these people built, and this is their day, and that's very powerful.
That is
yeah,
you got to own that.
Thinking about like how these are alternatives to like capitalist structures of consumption, right?
Yes,
Where you're creating opportunities for community to plug in without them having to pay to play.
Yes,
and that's very strong sentiment, especially given the increasing cost of living in the city, and how that sort of is reflected in the community back in the Bronx. And thinking about that, and also thinking about what you can add about the evolution. So Danny was involved in like the early stages to like up until recent, and now Hatuey, you're sort of leading this initiative. What challenges did you see then? What challenges do you see now? As well as successes of the fish parade. I was wondering if you could share some insights on that.
I mean, it takes a lot of meetings and a lot of coordination and a lot of conversation and follow up and emails and that's a lot of that. But you know, I think for people there were some people that didn't engage before this year, if I remember right now, and it was like, oh, a parade is, you know, oh, people understand what a parade is, right? And so what the unique thing about this particular parade is that it combines the elements of the parade, which is, you know, the walking and the music and the costumes and all of that stuff, and at the same time also have elements of protest in it still. Like, even though, you know, things have changed from the Fulton Fish Market time, you know, they're ready here. Actually, they gave money for the first fish parade to like get it, you know, get some. I think they did some like fish. They provided fish for people to do like a food competition or something way back when, something like that. Anyhow, so it's like this place where it's, you know, this it's not a parade. It's a parade for celebrate, I also operate to bring people together to advocate and fight for better, environmental, issues in Hunts Point. And so that's a unique thing that I really like about it. It reminds me a lot of Puerto Rico because there, when there's a protest, I remember, there's protests all the time, right? And I remember meeting some tourists one time, and so I was like, is there a festival going on? There's music and there's people dancing on the street and like and shouting and singing and like, no, that's actually a protest. And so, it's like this way of being angry, you know, and advocating for yourself and for your community and for all those things. And at the same time, you can have fun, you can bring people together, you can, have a family friendly event, so it reminds me a lot of that energy from Puerto Rico, for example, that I appreciate. They don't do the parades like that over there, but it's like this place where there's joy, there's anger, and there's community, and all of those things
Yeah, it's like a
come
form of
together.
therapy almost as
Sorry.
well. Seems like a form of therapy. It's
Also that, right? It's also that. And so I think this is one of the things that I like about it. Um, and I mean, it's hard because there's a lot of coordination that goes into it, right? And everyone has to, it's not like we have here's a ton of money, we'll do everything, some people sometimes donate, so we can get performers and things like that. But for the most part, all the organizations and people involved, like, okay, I'm gonna dedicate this staff time, or we're gonna bring this particular thing, um, so that everyone's contributing in their own way to the success, of the event. I think that's something that's still happening. Um, it is hard because it's sometimes people will tell you, I'll be there, and then they don't show up, or and that happens, right? So because the incentive is, it's not like we're giving them money like that or anything like that. So really people have to commit to show up, and sometimes people don't show up, and but that's part of it, right? That's you have to plan for those things. But sometimes people that show up more than what you also and give more than what you would expect. And so that kind of balances it a little bit. So for example, we had some performers that last minute didn't show up this year, this past one. And we're like, oh, well, that means we're gonna give more time for this other performance to be on stage. So kind of like, okay, we kind of work around that way. And it was great. Nobody noticed. um, for example, or like, one organization brought a bunch of things that they were doing like a workshop, and it was like, oh, I thought they were gonna do like this little thing, and the suddenly it's like took over, a bunch of tables, and it was great, and so you have those moments where things you think is not gonna work, but they work magically, come together, and that's the part of the unexpected part of it. Um, and it's hard, but I think it's a beautiful thing because you have all these folks sharing space, people that, oh, I haven't seen you in such a long time, like things like that happening, and people running into each other, and they have a conversation, and things come out of that. It's interesting to see those things, and the energy also, like people, even though the thing about the anger and all that stuff, even that's there is a joyful atmosphere. People feel like they're welcome, that they can be themselves, that they can talk about things, that they can have fun, and it's this like nice way to uh build community. I think those things are great about it, even though it's hard, it takes a lot of time and phone calls and things like that. I mean, it's similar, I think, since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And Danny, do you have any insights about the challenges and
Hmm.
success or impact and how that's evolved over time in
I
the
mean, There's a couple of things. That's what you mentioned. Like knocking on doors is a job in itself, and when you're knocking on doors with this thing called the fish parade, if you've never heard of it before, you're like, what? You have to develop a thick skin and you gotta get what's the word? You gotta get colorful in your presentation, let's say, to present this to people. Very
That, and
difficult.
I imagine also, compete compared to the Mermaid Parade in Coney Island,
Yes,
just an
yes.
excuse for people to come out to the street and just party. It's
Yes, yes. It's
beyond
not
just
Mardi
that.
Gras. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
not Mardi Gras. It's not like people naked and paint or whatever. Like it's the success of it is the metaphor, I think, of the fish parade. This how do you move a neighborhood, like this fluid thing and people kind of coming together and you know not being perfect, but like moving together, even if it's just quickly. And I love that metaphor. I think that's one of the successes of it is that the name of it alone kind of is so wacky that it just lets it kind of be open. You don't. But again, it's about people and movement, and I think that the metaphor is my favorite part of it. Is that it is hard to explain what a fish parade is, but once you do it, you kind of break people's brains a little bit, and there's something about that. You see the light bulb going off when you talk to people about it. They're like, "Oh, that's what. Oh, okay," and then it's like then you put people on, and that's what I like about it to some degree
It's
too.
beautiful metaphor when you think of a school of fish and what brings
Yes, yes,
them together. And
yes, and
I
the
mean,
aquariums and it speaks to the neighborhood. Again, surrounded by water, right, and usually in an adversarial fashion, right, like scared of the water, right, like the water is there and it's not for us, and here you are, like saying, no, the water is yours, and there's a park here, and this is it. Like it's very metaphorical, and I think it's a beautiful metaphor. Again, it doesn't have the trappings of the traditional, go shop for me on this day thing. It's really like, oh, let's talk about the environment or whatever, right? Like it's very unique.
Yeah.
Another challenge, I'm gonna throw this challenge out there because I think we've been very lucky, and I'm gonna knock on wood, even though I'm not superstitious. The weather part of it, right? You plan for 6, 7 months, and then it might rain that day, or tsunami, or you might. And so, how do you put together something that the unknown, right? Where the weather might challenge your day of festivities. That was always a challenge that we kept in mind. And
Yeah.
I always pull out the almanac, and it always tells me it's going to be hazy, sunny, with chance of rain on the third Saturday of June. It's like a thing, right? But that's again a bit of a thing to always think about. Is like people say, well, what if it rains? What are you going to do then? It's like, damn, what are we going to do if it rains? You bring it inside, right? But that's something for some people to say, well, I don't know if it's a good idea because how we're going to pull this energy into something that might not exist. So we rain or shine it, right? And we say, look, we're going to do it indoors no matter what. That's a challenge that we faced before and that we met. Again, there's never enough resources for it, right? We had, money for it. This thing would, be amazing. You get all the floats, you get all the cool performance. That'd be dope. There's never enough of that. But it's good and manageable at this point. Let's say that. One part that I will say that is a challenge and I think a beautiful part of it is the part I think I mentioned earlier, like about the honorees and creating a space to like march behind these leaders, of all ages and races and ethnicities and like different, I guess world views, if you will. They come from different parts and they march together. And they lead this procession of people. And for myself, I ended up thinking a lot. I dig through the news, or I know somebody that did this or that, and somebody might recommend them. And there's never enough space for that. And I would love to do a fish parade with just like a billion honorees, and everybody should be honored. And that's something that I always take into account because you do this work in Hunts Point, and you see, Cynthia, we're sitting here with you. We're almost like the gatekeepers for the story, and it's really not our full story. And I'm very conscious of that. And I'm very fortunate I had a job that I was able to do this, right? That gave me the space and the flexibility to be this person that led this thing. But the people that live in the neighborhood, that have to walk through the Brooklyn every day, that have to go to the crazy schools or deal with the shitty, food in the supermarket, like those are the people that need to be honored. Those are the people that should get credit for living and breathing that air every day and doing that. And again, I'm just kind of a conduit. And so that always bothered me that I didn't have enough vehicles or ways to honor like what it means to be a resident of Hunts Point. It never was enough for me, to be quite honest, which it still bothers me now. So I'll say that. But again, one of the successes of it, the things that keeps it going is that kind of challenge. Like how do how do you celebrate people? How do you thank them continuously, even if it's not, again, with a million people behind it? You know, why is that important? And that this is a way to do that. You know.
Right. And maybe this oral history can provide a platform for those voices as well.
Yeah. Again, I would love to get some of these folks to sit down and do these questions. I think that, yeah, that's what it's about. It's not just about the organization to it. It's about the people that live it. You know.
Wonderful.
That's right. That's right. You know, in this past year, actually, it was about we ended up changing the plans because we thought that it was going to rain, and it didn't rain in the end. But we actually ended up moving the parade location last, so it was a couple of days before because it was like, oh wait, it's gonna rain, but it didn't rain, and so it was logistically challenging to do that, but we know we did it and worked out.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
And what are the current, because I know that obviously this is a community effort, not just of joyous celebration, but also of protest that you all keep mentioning. What have been the current themes and issues that have been affecting the community that have been reflected in the protest portions of the parade? Like, what are the themes that have surfaced in the community in the last few years that really stand out? And what will be the theme or the issue that you foresee for the upcoming Fish Parade?
But we haven't decided on this coming month, so don't know yet. um I know that air quality is a big issue, in Hunts Point. That is because of the food distribution center that feeds the tri-state area, and there's thousands of truck trips every day with all the exhaust pipes and all that stuff from the trucks and all the other industry that is around. So basically, if you don't know about Hunts Point, so basically Hunts Point is like there's a peninsula, and then within that there's like a little area where people live, and then everything else surrounding that, it's industry. And so all of that industry, affects the people that are, that are in that poor residential area. And so air quality is a big issue, right? So high rates of asthma and other, respiratory, related issues. Those are big. Um, there's food issues around access to affordable quality, good quality food. Because the thing is, the irony of it is like all these people, most likely the food that you get from your grocery comes through Hunts Point. It's a big percentage of the food that we eat in the restaurants and so forth has to come through Hunts Point in New York City and beyond. And so, but that food that you might get in, Brooklyn or whatever, is not the same food that people can get here. And so, there's a big gap, right? Because once there's no supermarkets in Hunts Point that I'm aware of. You have to go to the other side of the Bruckner to buy your produce and all those things. And so that's another issue, right? I mean, I think those are big ones, right? Um, there's in terms of the environment, and I know that the point is involving a bunch of campaigns related to that, right? To those, and, I think about other things, but maybe Danny want to add anything there from other years.
Yeah, I think those are issues again that you mentioned that are like ongoing, and there's campaigns around it, like if not directly, like always indirectly, right? Some things that I know we fought in the past and that we highlighted during the Fish Parade. One year we had there was a lot of violence, amongst young people, and so we highlighted that, and brought some folks that did like conflict mediation to do some work as part of that. Transportation, right? Hatuey mentioned biking, getting lanes for people to safely traverse the neighborhood, the greenway. Like those are fights, right? Those are things that we presented to people during the Fish Parade and the resource sharing portion, if you will, of the day, right? green spaces, again, transportation. I know recently the Bronx White Plan, that was led by BCDI and groups like the Point and other groups, we're using that as a space again to gather data and information, on the needs of the neighborhoods, and the residents. And so again, it's a space where you can kind of talk about these things, share some of the findings from the last year and some of the highlights from some of the amazing things that our people are doing. Another way to be a part of it. So organizations come out and they're doing, let's say, something around health or diabetes, or maybe they're doing like a heart, blood pressure test or whatever. They're really looking for you to step into more, and for you to kind of be led into a space where you can be empowered and or use a resource. So I think that's not to say that there's always an issue, right? And that's why we bring the resources out, because there's multiple issues that kind of sit next to each other in the neighborhood. And so we're having people outlet for, a variety of them at once is kind of why we designed it in that way also, right? Because you're not going to just, unfortunately, just talk about one thing in that neighborhood. You're talking about a bunch of things kind of stacked on top of each other that kind of create the conditions that people live through. So that's the thing. And I think a couple years back, we tried a different parade, and it was more of a oral history, I guess, tour, if you will, of Rochelle, who, for many years works at the Point, and like she grew up in the neighborhood, and it was almost like a walk through her life, and I guess it was also about cultural preservation. And so what happens to this neighborhood as it changes, right? And gentrification has hit the neighborhood, right? It's not a verse, it's not out there, it's not coming in 10 years, it's like there, right? So that's another thing too that I think comes up a lot is the changes to the neighborhood, who owns the neighborhood, like who gets to enjoy this neighborhood moving forward. I think that's a huge fight because that's going to continue to change in New York City, period, right? That's a citywide, maybe a statewide, an American-wide problem that we have right now is, once you make something and build it, why can't you, get to reap the rewards of that? Mm-hmm. And Hunt's Point is that neighborhood was built by families, by a lot of mothers that fought, to keep asthma at bay and to keep the trucks out. And they've accomplished so much, but they can't afford to live there. And so what does that mean? And I don't know if that's like a fish parade thing, but that's definitely something that I know was a challenge for me as a leader in the neighborhood. And the idea of the Point is like, how do you address that? How do you address development without displacement, as we call it, right? Very challenging, very, very challenging. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's where my brain is at when it comes to how it can be of service to the neighborhood, like where those conversations are,
Thank you for sharing that. That definitely adds a lot more context as well for folks who aren't familiar with the area or the city, right? Once we start sharing these stories and they become public, more folks are going to learn more about Hunts Point, and these are very pertinent. I see this a lot in North Brooklyn where I'm at as well, so it's very much a very real thing. What do you do after the successes? Even if it's not financial, there's also the emotional displacement that occurs. Mm-hmm. And I feel like from what you're telling me with the fish parade, it feels like this is one way of the community combating that emotional displacement, is to remind people that you're still there. We're still here. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah. When you don't own much, you own the things that you can own. And one thing I should tell people, why come to the parade? Because this is your parade. And I always say that to people, like, this is your parade. Oh, the young people, oh no, this is not fish parade. This is your parade. And I always mention that. And that's the onus that you have with this thing that's going to continue to keep it going the way that it is, right? People own it. They like that it's weird and doesn't make any sense, but it is theirs, and that they can own that. That's so powerful. And again, in a world where sadly ownership is everything, and we don't ever have enough of it. We can't control enough of our lives. You can kind of control one day of your existence. That's powerful. That has ripples.
Absolutely. Hatuey, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Not much. I think. I mean, all of those things. That all of those and the issues that Danny mentioned definitely resonate. I think the cultural aspect of it is great, and it's very important, for folks to be able to bring their own talents, celebrate their culture, have that, be on display and like bring people together. And it was fun this year because we were marching, and we had many little cardboard cuttings that we designed, uh and we were whoever was watching from their homes when we were coming through, we are like, come join us, here's the thing. And some people actually did join us, and it was kind of cool to have like that spontaneous uh reaction, for people to be like, oh, this is cool, I want to just follow for a moment and come and have fun. Yeah, and I think the the opportunities for a lot of the organizations and a lot of the campaigns to be reinforced and invigorated through being there. It's important because the work af before the parade, to get the parade there, and all of that, it's important. And also it's important that whatever work that's happening after the parade, all the organizing, all those things continue. And so getting people involved with that, it's also part of it. Um, so yeah, I mean, culture is a powerful thing to use in this way, right? And I think the great vehicle for change, even though it might not look like it from the outside, but it's important. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think this is a nice segue into thinking about what your hope for the future is for the fish parade. Um, Either one of you can jump in and share any reflections on that, on what you think has been and can be accomplished further still with the initiative at this community stakeholder level with the fish parade, if that makes any sense.
I mean, uh, I think that I hope Fish Parade continues. I mean, we already have a date for next one, third Saturday of June. Um, uh, I mean, I think that strengthening those connections with people, um, and building up to the parade, and then after, um, I hope that we can work, on that more, um, so that kind of building on what I was saying about like how do we continue building on to the campaigns and the work, that we have this fun thing, but the other work that also is important. The most boring part of organizing is sitting in the meetings and doing those things, right? But it's important work that needs to happen. And so being able to celebrate, take a moment to do that, and also continue organizing, um, it's really key. And I hope that we continue to do that more powerfully, have more young people, all those things. This it's hard to like say this particular goal, right? Or this particular thing. Um, but if we do it well, it means that those young people go, oh, I used to go there when I was a kid, or I was doing this thing, or actually met some folks that were like, they performed like 18 years ago in the fish parade, and they performed this year. And it was like, that's a great, beautiful thing to see folks growing up, experiencing the parade, and or being part of it, and then suddenly like, oh, I'm in it, I'm gonna perform, I'm gonna show my work. That's important too, so that there's spaces for all this kinds of intergenerational, you know, exchange to continue happening. And not only politically, but on the community and the cultural level. So it's also that's important. Those bonds, those bonds that have been broken because of COVID, right? Because we lost that um, connection, those relationships were broken. And so rebuilding those connections and strengthening those connections, it's important. And so that we can have more stories like that. Like, hey, I used to go there. I saw this, that, and the other perform. I'm gonna be performing there, next one, or something like that. I think that's also a great thing to have. Doesn't have to be all about politics, right? It's all about all of those things together.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think I would my hope for it is that it would continue, obviously, right? I think again it's vital for that neighborhood to have something like that continue, because it is one of the few constants maybe that are positive to some degree, and again that people can kind of look forward to generationally, right? Of all ages, not just one particular group can take advantage of it. So I would love for it to continue for that reason. I think also my hope for it is that it will continue to be led by like artists and activists and like young people, and not like I don't know, like somebody who just comes in to just what is it, like a traditional party planner or something, like I love that it's led by people that are like already there doing the work, and it's not like an outsider coming in to make it happen. And so I would love for it to continue to be that way. There's never enough spaces for artists to lead, right? To do this kind of work, right? So, the Hatueys and folks like that, like they're vital to our communities, and we kind of relegate them to certain kind of work. And this is like another space that shows that yes, artists can like make things happen, right, and bring people together. And so I would love for that to continue. And similar to you know like other things, like you travel the world and you'd be surprised at the impact that a place like the Point has on organizations and other communities, and it has served as a model to things that we take for granted, like certain language and certain ideas that are normal to us, have become normal to other people as climate changes, as we talk about justice and environment more broadly now. Again, that's something that was born in that neighborhood, and that model, I think, for how you celebrate a neighborhood in a new way. Again, it doesn't have to be a fish parade, but maybe it can serve as a model for other neighborhoods that are trying to galvanize everybody together and do something nice and powerful. Hopefully, it does serve as a model and an inspiration for some other groups. That's my hope, that we could have multiple fish parades floating around and not just all this other stuff that people flock to because they don't have an alternative.
It's only one flavor. You all have many flavors.
Yeah. Come be part of the flavor. Exactly. That's important.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. At the end of the day, how would you characterize the impact of all of this work in your own life and in your own thinking? And maybe we'll kick it off to Hatuey. Hatuey, what do you think?
Let's see. I think so. The idea that culture is like this, elitist thing that only certain people, you know, have access to or the means to produce or all those things. This event reinforces the opposite of that, right? That this is something that belongs, like Danny was saying, it belongs to people here in Hunts Point, um, and that anyone can be part of, right? And all the ways that we're creative can show up, right? And this the creativity is a human, thing. It's not only for the people that go to school and things like that. Even though I went to school and things like that. So I like to use that as a way to remind myself that there's power in culture, that there's power in people coming together, that there's power in celebrating the culture, and there's power in fighting for their environment, for environmental justice. And so it's a good reminder of all those things, and to also inspire and push me to continue that work, right? And supporting that kind of work. Because, we need it. everyone needs to do something right now, right? We're in a climate crisis. Environmental justice has been going on for a long time. Hunts Point has been fighting for a long time. The Point has been fighting for a long time. And we all need to do our part in whatever way we can, right? And as an artist, as a creative person, this is one of the ways I can get folks involved. And it's not the only way. It's one of the flavors, of the ways, right? And so in terms of that, I think, if I can talk, if I can, when I hopefully get to be old and my daughter gets to grow and all the things, and she looks at me and asks me, you know, what were you doing when all this stuff was happening? Did you do something about it? I want to be able to answer that question and feel that I can go to sleep at night. You know what I mean? And I was doing this and I was contributing in this way, and feel like it was impactful, right? And it did something, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that's for me, like what keeps me going and what I feel like the impact of the work is. If we're moving the needle, even if it's just a little bit, I'm just one person, but if we are together, we can do this. So hopefully that.
Thank you, Hatuey. Danny?
Yeah, I think the work of the Point is very like personal work for me, for many reasons, obviously, because I'm not only somebody who worked there, but again, I'm like a product of the programming there. And so this was like, how do you say, this is, if I was to curate something or if I was to, exhibit something, like this is pretty much the biggest ones that I can do. Like this is the biggest curation I've ever had, right? I was able to do like in that part of my brain and exercising myself in that way. And that's big because, again, I don't, if you could imagine when I was young, I used to get in trouble for being too quiet, right? Like I'm not a boisterous person, and I wasn't known to be the person to stand up and say, well, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. But this is the vehicle. Like these are the things that kind of help me become that person and kind of break, if you will, from my own, misunderstandings of what it means to be a leader. And I think I just wanted to work. I just wanted to do something fun and creative my whole life, and this is the vehicle for that. And so it has a huge impact on me. It's helped me build, I guess, a life on my terms with people. Again, that maybe think similar to me, not exactly, but have the same values to some degree as myself, and that's big. That's given me a lot of self-esteem. That's given me a lot to think about and ways to explore and see the world, like a lens to see the world. And that's the impact this has on me, right? Like being a part of the Fish Parade is that it's like bigger than me, and I feel it, and it's important. I don't know how to put it to you. Yeah, it gave me a voice. Let me say that in another kind of way, not just inside the Point walls, but like on a community level, and that's very unique and very powerful. And I don't know if I necessarily wanted that, but I felt like I needed to be a part of that. And like you said, Hatuey, like when history kind of settles and the stories are told, I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that I was that somebody saw me that way and said, look, we have trust in you. Go, lead these people up that crazy hill and scream and shout on a Saturday morning. It's okay. You're that person. And that's, nobody pays you for that. There's not a paycheck for that. There's no job description for that. And certainly, like, my parents never knew that they would raise somebody to be that. I had no idea I'd be that person. And I'll it'll be an asterisk in my life, if you will, that I led people up in a parade, considering that I never go to parades myself otherwise, right? I don't like noise like that. I'm like averse to it. But that's the impact it has, is that it makes you become this person that you never thought you'd become. And that's it. Like that's everything. You can move through life confidently when you're able to do that at a certain age in your life,
Thank you so much. And I have I'm so honored, and I have such great admiration for all the work that you both do with this. this has a value beyond the monetary. This is priceless, this work that you all do for the community. So thank you for that. I think we're done. Do you have any final words before we end today's interview?
I don't even know. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier getting other folks involved. I would love to, you know, after we're done with this conversation, to maybe in the new year kind of bridge that and you know, connect you back to some of these other folks that I think I would love to hear their story, their version of it, and be in communion with them while we're this thing out. I think that's for me, you know, very important. So I just want to think about who those people are and make sure that we can invite them out, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
That's exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you both so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to pause the recording now. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Good to meet you. Thank you, Hatuey.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you for